Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're taking complex, industry-level data and, turning it into actionable insights. We're putting the processed foods industry squarely under the microscope. Look, we all see those low-fat or no-added sugar labels when we're walking down the grocery store aisles, right? But how do analysts actually track if a company is truly adapting to healthier trends, or if they're just, playing a clever marketing game? Let's look at the exact standards used to measure this.
Here is our roadmap for today. 1. The new food standard. 2. Why health and nutrition matters. 3. Tracking healthy product revenue. 4. Managing consumer nutritional concerns. And 5. The big picture takeaway. Basically, we'll be looking at the two sides of the coin for ESG reporting here, the hard numbers and the human process.
All right, starting off with Section 1, the new food standard.
And this brilliantly illustrates exactly where our data is coming from today. We're looking directly at the SASB standards, which now sit under the umbrella of the IFRS Foundation. Honestly, this is the absolute gold standard for sustainability reporting. We're not talking about arbitrary guesses or gut feelings here. This provides a rigorous, globally recognized framework requiring companies to disclose the real risks and opportunities that directly affect their cash flows. This is literally the playbook companies use to report their data to the market.
But before we start crunching the metrics, we really need to understand the beast we're dealing with. The processed foods industry is entirely defined by massive scale. We're talking about the global giants making your bread, frozen foods, snacks, condiments, all that stuff designed for immediate retail consumption. And what makes this so fascinating and frankly quite risky is that these companies rely on incredibly large, complex global ingredient supply chains. When consumer preferences shift worldwide, these massive supply chains have to pivot. And let me tell you, that takes serious time, a lot of money, and intense strategic management.
Moving on to Section 2, why health and nutrition matters.
So, I want you to think about this question for a second. How do you practically measure a massive food company's response to the obesity epidemic, or the rising concerns over ingredient safety? Seriously, how do you put a number on that? Nutritional value just isn't a simple consumer preference anymore. It's an absolute battleground for market competition. Companies are facing genuine, existential threats from new regulations, like looming taxes on highly processed, unhealthy foods. If a company ignores this shift, they're looking at reduced demand and shrinking profit margins over the long haul.
That is exactly why the standard evaluates how companies adapt to these shifting consumer demands. It's all about capturing new, emerging market segments that are demanding healthier food, while simultaneously dodging the reputational damage and the regulatory targets that are pretty much painted on their backs. At the end of the day, if a company can actually prove they're shifting their portfolio toward healthier options, they are proving they're financially resilient.
Let's get into Section 3, tracking healthy product revenue.
Okay, now we're getting into the hard math, side A of our coin. Let's look at the very first major quantitative requirement. The SASB standard actually requires companies to state exactly how much revenue, in their presentation currency, is generated from products labeled or marketed to promote health and nutrition attributes. It takes all that lofty corporate talk about wellness and grounds it in cold, hard cash. If a company claims health is a major priority, their actual revenue breakdown needs to prove it.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that you might naturally assume any positive label counts as healthy revenue, right? But the standard is actually surprisingly strict. It draws a very rigid, clear line between what is included in this revenue bucket and what is explicitly excluded. Let's break down exactly what makes the cut. So, to be counted in that healthy revenue metric, the product has to promote very specific attributes. This includes labels claiming no additives, stuff like artificial sweeteners, colors, or industrially produced trans fats. It also counts products marketed as low-fat, low-sodium, or diet according to local jurisdictional laws. Oh, and if a product boasts added beneficial nutrients like rich in vitamin C or good source of fiber, or if it makes a relative claim like reduced sugar, boom, that counts too. The key takeaway here is that these are direct, measurable nutritional improvements.
When companies actually report this data, it allows analysts to directly compare their total revenue against the specific, carved-out slice coming from healthier products. It gives investors an immediate, crystal-clear picture of what portion of a company's sales is actually future-proofed against changing health regulations and shifting consumer diets.
Which brings us to Section 4, managing consumer nutritional concerns.
So you've tracked the revenue, that's great, but how do you prevent the next nutritional PR disaster? This brings us to the qualitative side of the coin. You can't just count the money, you need a process. The The standard asks companies to really detail their internal mechanisms. Step 1. How do they even identify nutritional concerns? Are they running toxicology studies or combing through consumer feedback? Step 2. How do they manage and communicate those risks once they find them? And Step 3. How do they utilize external certifications to build up consumer trust?
Let's look a bit closer at that second step, management. The standard wants to see real, tangible actions here. Are they actually increasing labeling transparency? Are they actively substituting or completely phasing out unsustainable or unhealthy ingredients? What about updating their portion sizes to reflect better dietary habits? A really great indicator of strong management is if a company aligns its internal strategies with rigorous international standards. We're talking about things like the World Health Organization's Global Strategy on Diet, Physical Activity, and Health, or the FAO's Codex Alimentarius, which is basically the International Food Code.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Remember earlier when I said certifications like organic or gluten-free were actually excluded from the healthy revenue math? Well, they are incredibly vital right here. The standard requires companies to discuss their use of these specific third-party certifications as part of their qualitative management strategy. It's how they address consumer preferences regarding specific ingredients and potential allergens.
And finally, Section 5, the big picture takeaway.
To pull this all together, just consider this mandate. The standard explicitly requires companies to discuss significant complaints, such as those resulting in significant lawsuits relating to nutritional and health concerns. I mean, that is the stark reality of the situation. Getting health and nutrition wrong isn't just about losing a few customers to a competitor. It's about immense legal liability and potentially devastating reputational damage. The stakes for measuring and managing this correctly are just incredibly high.
So the crucial point is this. Measuring a food company's health initiatives requires a two-sided coin. On one side, you absolutely need the hard quantitative revenue data to prove that healthier products are actually selling and generating real cash. But you have to pair that with a proactive qualitative management process that identifies risks, phases out the bad ingredients, and utilizes trusted certifications. Together, these two metrics prove true corporate resilience in the face of a rapidly changing world. Which leaves us with this final thought. When you look at your favorite food brands, are they genuinely transforming their complex supply chains and tracking their revenue to adapt for tomorrow's health demands? Or are they just slapping a shiny new, totally meaningless label on the exact same old product? Well, armed with an understanding of these reporting standards, you now know exactly where to look in their corporate disclosures to find the real answer. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.